Emerson, Lake and Palmer, also known as ELP, are a sporadically active English progressive rock supergroup. They found success in the 1970s and have sold over 40 million albums and headlined large stadium concerts. The band consists of Keith Emerson, Greg Lake and Carl Palmer. They are one of the most popular and commercially successful progressive rock bands. The ELP sound is dominated by the Hammond organ, Moog synthesizer, and piano of the flamboyant virtuoso Emerson. The band's compositions are heavily influenced by classical music in addition to jazz and at least in their early years a hard rock. Many of their pieces are arrangements of, or contain quotations from, classical music, and they can be said to fit into the subgenre of symphonic rock. However, Lake ensured that their albums contained a regular stream of simple, accessible acoustic ballads, many of which received heavy radio airplay. Lake, in addition to providing vocals, bass guitar, electric guitar and lyrics, also produced the band's first 5 albums. History, background and formation: Keith Emerson and Greg Lake, both exploring options outside of their existing bands, met at Fillmore West in San Francisco. On working together they found their styles to be compatible and complementary. Keith described their first meeting in an interview in 1972. Greg was moving a bass line and I played the piano and back and zap. It was there. They had actually shared the same venues in 1969 Emerson in the Nice and Lake and King Crimson, first at the 9th Jazz and Blues Pop Festival in Plumpton, England, and at Fairfield Halls in Croydon, England. Wanting to launch a keyboard drum band, Emerson and Lake sought a drummer. They initially approached drummer Mitch Mitchell, who was at a loose end following the breakup of the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Hendrix's departure to the Band of Gypsys. Mitchell subsequently suggested a jam session with himself, Lake, Emerson and Hendrix. Although this session never took place, it led to press rumors of a planned but abandoned supergroup named Help, rumors which survived for over 40 years until Lake finally debunked them in 2012. Meanwhile, Robert Stigwood had suggested Carl Palmer, formerly of the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and at the time a member of Atomic Rooster. Palmer was initially reluctant to leave Atomic Rooster but was persuaded by the magic he felt when playing with Emerson and Lake. The name Emerson, Lake and Palmer came about for 2 or 3 reasons: to remove the focus on Emerson as the most famous of the 3 and to ensure that they were not called the New Niece. Although their debut was in the Guildhall, Plymouth, on August 23, 1970, it was their performance 6 days later, at the Isle of Wight Festival, that drew the most attention to the new band. The DVD of the performance, released in 2006, is appropriately titled The Birth of a Band. The band's drawing power as a live band helped them get a record contract with U.S. label Atlantic Records. Emerson explained, "The president of Atlantic, Ahmet Ertegun, tells me the reason he signed us is because we could sell out 20,000 seaters before we even had a record out. That was enough for him to think that a lot of people would go out and buy the record when it did come out." Debut album and pictures at an exhibition. Their debut album was simply titled Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and was released in late 1970. It was mostly a collection of solo pieces. Keith Emerson contributed a series of treatments of classical pieces and an original organ and piano piece. Carl Palmer provided a drum solo and Greg Lake provided 2 ballads, beginning with the folky, extended work Take a Pebble. It was the ballad, Lucky Man, which was a song Lake wrote when he had his first guitar at the age of 12, that brought the band to prominence. It received heavy radio play in the UK and Europe, and also became a surprise hit in America. The commercial success of Lucky Man, combined with a strong performance at the Isle of Wight Festival, brought ELP rapidly to prominence. The band's March 1971 live recording, Pictures at an Exhibition, an interpretation of Modest Mussorg's Guy's work of the same name, was issued as a low-priced record, the success of which contributed to the band's overall popularity. Due to management conflicts, the recording was not released until after Tarkus, their second studio album. The record company was reluctant to release a classical suite as an album, and insisted it be released on their classical music label instead. Fearing that this would lead to poor sales, ELP instead decided to shelve the work. After the success of their second album, however, the label agreed to release Pictures as a budget live album. It was unprecedented for a rock band to devote an entire album to a treatment of a classical work, and Pictures remains the only complete classical suite that has hit the top 10 in either the US or the UK. The album mixed in a ballad by Greg Lake, a blues variation section by Emerson and many instances of heavily electronic and synthesized interpretations of Moog's Guy's work. 1971 a Euro 1972, Tarkus and Trilogy, Tarkus, released in 1971, was their first successful concept album, described as a story about reverse evolution. Combining a side-long song with an assortment of hard rock songs, an instrumental and even some comic songs, it was quickly cited as landmark work in progressive rock. The epic Tarkus, recorded in just 4 days, is a 7-part rock suite which incorporates a number of complex time signatures. The breadth and complexity of the music combined with a series of William Neal paintings incorporated into the sleeve art helped to cement ELP's reputation as being on the forefront of progressive rock music. The 1972 album Trilogy contained ELP's only top 40 single in the USA, From the Beginning. Like Lucky Man, the song was a distinctively mellow acoustic ballad broken by an extended Moog solo. The album also featured a cover of Her Down from Aaron Copland's Rodeo as well as some self-penned suites. It is cited by Lake as his favorite ELP album. However, only Her Down persisted as a live song. It was with the release of Trilogy that ELP were able to focus heavily on international touring. 1973 a Euro 1974, Brain Salad Surgery and worldwide touring. In 1973, the band had garnered enough recognition to form their own record label, Manticore Records, and purchased an abandoned cinema as their own rehearsal hall. In late 1973, Brain Salad Surgery, with sleeve designed by H. Giga, became the band's best-known studio album. The lyrics were co-written by Peter Sinfield, whom Greg Lake had collaborated with in King Crimson. It was their most ambitious album to date, with one of the tracks, Carnival 9, sprawling over both sides of the album. It also contained a cover of Alberto Ginastera's Toccata, the first musical recording to employ synthesized percussion, in the form of an acoustic drum kit fitted with pickups that triggered electronic sounds, which were combined with the kit's acoustic sounds. The subsequent world tours were documented with a massive 3-LP live recording, Welcome Back My Friends to the Show That Never Ends. By April 1974, ELP were on top of the bill during the California Jam Festival, pushing co-stars Deep Purple to second billing. ELP's California Jam performance was broadcast nationwide in the United States, and attended by over 200,000 paying fans. By the end of 1974, ELP were just about tied with Led Zeppelin as the highest-grossing live band in the world. On stage, the band exhibited an unorthodox mix of virtuoso musicianship and over-the-top theatrical bombast. Their extravagant and often aggressive live shows received much criticism in this regard. The theatrics consisted of a Persian carpet, a grand piano spinning end over end, a rotating percussion platform, and a Hammond organ being upended and thrown around on stage to create feedback. Emerson often used a knife given to him by Lemmy Kilmister to force the keys on the organ to stay down. The band took a full Moog modular synthesizer instrument, which Dr. Robert Moog thought would never work live on the road with them, which added to the uniqueness of the band's live sound. 1975 a Euro 1977, hiatus and the Works album, ELP then took a 3-year break to reinvent their music, but lost contact with the changing musical scene. They eventually released the double album, Works, in which each member had a side to himself. Side 4 contained full band pieces, including a highly synthesized cover of Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man. Released as a single, it reached number 2 in the UK charts. A great deal of the album was recorded with an orchestral accompaniment. In fact, Keith Emerson's side consisted solely of a 20-minute piano concerto which he had composed himself. This album was soon followed by Works Volume 2, which consisted entirely of 3 Euro 4-minute songs including ballads, pop songs, jazzy instrumentals and a Christmas single. It was seen as a collection of leftovers and was ELP's first commercial failure. The band toured the US and Canada in 1977 and 1978 with a schedule of night-after-night performances some with a full orchestra, which was a heavy burden on tour revenues. But as disco, punk rock, corporate rock and new wave styles began to alter the musical landscape, ELP could no longer generate the same excitement. Eventually, they drifted apart due to personality conflicts and irreconcilable differences concerning musical direction. Greg Lake commented on the Beyond the Beginning documentary about the Works tour that they had lost about $3 million from their pockets. On the same documentary, Keith Emerson said, "They still blame him for it, you and your bloody orchestra." 1978, First Breakup, their last studio album of the 1970s, Love Beach, was dismissed even by the trio itself, who admitted it was delivered to fulfill a contractual obligation. Love Beach was ill-received by the music press. Side 1 features Lake and consists of several shorter songs in an attempt to put something in the pop charts. Side 2's composition, Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman, is a 4-part narration of the tale of a soldier in the Second World War. The album's cover photograph which showed the 3 band members posing with their shirts unbuttoned, on a tropical beach engendered no small amount of ridicule, with Palmer complaining the group looked like disco stars the Bee Gees. Emerson, Lake and Palmer disbanded later in 1979. The live LP in concert was released after they had broken up, also to fulfill contractual obligations. It was cobbled together from the ill-fated orchestral tour, and was later rebranded Works Live. Later incarnations, Emerson, Lake and Powell and 3, in 1985, Emerson and Lake formed Emerson, Lake and Powell with ex-Rainbow and session drummer Cozy Powell. Palmer declined to participate in a reunion, as he was too busy with commitments to Asia. Rumors also linked Bill Bruford to their new lineup, but the former Yes drummer remained committed to King Crimson and his own group, Earthworks. The album Emerson, Lake and Powell charted reasonably well, with a major single, Touch and Go, generating some radio and MTV exposure for the trio. However, the old interpersonal tensions between Lake and Emerson resurfaced during the 1986 tour. Emerson and Palmer subsequently joined with Robert Berry to form the band 3. They released an album, To the Power of 3, in 1988. 1990s, Reformation and Second Breakup. In 1991, Emerson, Lake and Palmer reformed and issued a 1992 comeback album, Black Moon, on JVC. Their 1992 '93 world tours were successful, culminating in a performance at the Wilton Theatre in Los Angeles in early 1993 that has been heavily bootlegged. But, reportedly, Palmer suffered from carpal tunnel syndrome in one hand and Emerson had been treated for a repetitive stress disorder. In 1994, the band released a follow-up album, In the Hot Seat. Emerson and Palmer eventually recovered enough to start touring again, beginning in 1996. Their tour schedules brought them to Japan, South America, Europe, the United States and Canada, playing new versions of older work. He played in significantly smaller venues compared to their heyday. Their last show was in San Diego, California, in August 1998. Conflicts over a new album led to another breakup. 2000s and 2010s, re-releases, 2010 tour and one of 40th anniversary concert. In 2003, UK independent label Invisible Hands Music released the 3-CD box set Reworks, Brain Salad Perjury, a new work created by Keith Emerson in collaboration with Mike Bennett, using sampling technology. In April 2010, Emerson and Lake embarked on a North American tour, presenting an acoustic repertoire of their work. On May 14, 2010, Shout! Factory released A Time and a Place, a 4-CD collection of Emerson, Lake and Palmer live tracks. On July 25, 2010, Emerson, Lake and Palmer played a one-off 40th anniversary concert, headlining the High Voltage Festival event in Victoria Park, London. The entire concert was later released as the double CD live album High Voltage. On February 22, 2011, Shout! released Live at Nassau Coliseum 78, a 2-CD set live recording of an Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert on February 9, 1978 at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Uniondale, New York. On August 29, 2011, Emerson, Lake and Palmer released on DVD and Blu-ray. Welcome Back My Friends 40th Anniversary Reunion Concert. High Voltage Festival, July 25, 2010, the film of the 40th anniversary concert in Victoria Park, London. A Blu-ray and SD DVD of the concert was produced by Concert One Limited, together with a definitive documentary of the band's 40-year history. On December 6, 2011, Shout! Factory released Live at the Ma Wai Soul Festival 72, a single CD set live recording of an Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert on April 2, 1972 at the Ma Wai Soul Festival, Vega Baja, Puerto Rico. ELP have signed a worldwide licensing deal with Sony Music Entertainment. In North America, the band are moving to Razor and Tie. Influence: Koji Kondo, Nintendo's first video game composer, cited ELP as a major influence on his work. Kondo's work on the Super Mario and The Legend of Zelda series, which have sold hundreds of millions of copies, has been recorded by many orchestras around the globe. Nobuo Uematsu, best known for scoring the majority of titles in the Final Fantasy series and considered one of the most respected composers in the video game industry, cites ELP as one of his influences. Criticism: ELP were heavily criticized by some music critics, one citing a joke, "How do you spell pretentious?" ELP. Robert Christgau said of the band, "These guys are as stupid as their most pretentious fans." Christgau called ELP the world's most overweening progressive group. John Kellman of All About Jazz noted that an overbearing sense of self-importance turned ELP from one of the 1970s most exciting new groups into the definition of masturbatory excess and self-aggrandizement in only a few short years. Kellman also stated that in their fall from grace, ELP represented everything wrong with progressive rock. DJ John Peel went so far as to describe the band as a waste of talent and electricity. Discography: Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Tarkus, Trilogy, Brain Salad Surgery, Works Volume 1, Works Volume 2, Love Beach, Black Moon, In the Hot Seat. See also, Emerson, Lake and Powell, 3, Alliance, The Best, List of rock instrumentals, references. Further reading: Macon, Edward. Endless Enigma, A Musical Biography of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Open Court Publishing Company. ISBN A0-8126-9596-8. Forrester, George. Hansen, Martin. Askew, Frank. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Show That Never Ends, A Musical Biography. Helter Skelter Publishing. ISBN A1-900924-17. Freeman, Gary. Do You Wanna Play Some Magic? Emerson, Lake and Palmer in Concert 1970–1979, A Live History. Soundcheck Books. ISBN A978-0956642080. External links, Official website, Emerson, Lake and Palmer at All Music, Emerson, Lake and Palmer Discography at Discogs, ELP at DMOZ.